We had started the Rambam in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah about the Ribono Shel Olam being the only true existence. And we're going to continue there tomorrow because the Rambam is going to help us explain what we're going to be reading now in the Daas Tevunos. So we're on page 51 of the Daas Tevunos, Nun Aleph, in our Friedlander's print. And we're still in paragraph 58 if you're following the paragraphs in the English Daas Tevunos. Friedlander's caption is Acharei Shegila Sherotza B'Kavod Hanebroim. After the Ribono Shel Olam revealed that it is his will, Rotze, Rotzon, Rotze, Rotzon. Everything is Rotze, Rotzon. It's a will, it's not a need. God has no needs. He is a mukhrach in and of himself. He is a self-independent existence. And as we read in the Rambam in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah, if nothing existed, it would have absolutely no effect on him. If in a millisecond, chas v'sholom, everything was gone, no Earth, no Milky Way, no Saturn, nothing beyond the Milky Way, nothing, there's nothing. We go back to Tohu Vavohu, and even before Tohu Vavohu, whatever, Tohu and Vohu. God's not affected in any way. Not in an iota is his existence affected. But if God's will ceases to will the continued existence of anything, it ceases to exist. We call that death. And death can be a partial death, person can get very sick. And that means, as the Ramchal is going to explain in the coming days, that the Ribono Shel Olam wills a person's life. And when that will ceases, it could be the cessation of a will, chas v'sholom, over a kidney. It could be the cessation of a will over an eye. Or it could be shut off the switch and the cessation of life itself. But the shefa that the Ribono Shel Olam sends is a constant affirmative shefa. And this, therefore, the idea that God sent someone, God forbid, a heart attack is a false statement. God doesn't send anyone a heart attack. He doesn't have to affirmatively send a heart attack to anyone. The Ribono Shel Olam, a human being requires a constant shefa to keep things going. We all understand how complex this piece of machinery is and how the kidneys, the liver, the blood, the spine, the heart, the lungs, the mouth, the eyes, the brain, the nervous system, how everything has to perfectly work together in sync. And chas v'sholom, when it doesn't work in sync, we're at a doctor's office or on a surgery table. It needs to work in sync. Now, what's keeping this work in sync? A shefa from the Ribono Shel Olam constantly. It's a shefa eyeball, it's a shefa eardrum, it's a shefa nostril, it's a shefa lung, it's a shefa heart, it's a shefa kidney, it's a shefa liver. And it's a shefa to keep them all working together. The cessation, chas v'sholom, of that positive shefa leads to its own result. The Ribono Shel Olam doesn't have to send anything, it's just the cessation of a shefa, which we will see as we continue in the Sefer. But it's all a will. It's will. It's not mukhrach. It doesn't have to be any given way. He's not a mukhrach. Everything comes down to his ratzon. After the Ribono Shel Olam willed that he wants the creation, human beings, to give him kavod, Habriya hi lechvodo. The Bria therefore became a source of kavod for the Ribono Shel Olam. Kodem shegila ritzono. However, before God revealed his will, lo chasa lo kavod. He was not missing kavod. The pasuk that the Ramchal is going to focus on is Yehi chavod Hashem la'olam, Yismach Hashem b'masa. It's a pasuk in Tehillim. Yehi chavod Hashem la'olam. We say it every day in Psuki de Zimra, Yehi chavod Hashem la'olam. Let God's kavod, let God's honor be forever, and God should rejoice in his creation. It sounds like we want to give God kavod. Why do you give a person kavod? He's deserving of kavod. We want to show him kavod. That should never be translated to mean that God needs covet, so give him covet. Sometimes we say that this is a person that needs to be shown a lot of gratitude. He needs it. And a person is deserving of gratitude. A person has a right to hakaras hatoyv. Person sometimes needs covet. We say, give him his due. He needs some covet, give him his due. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need covet. So the pasuk Yehi Chavod Hashem L'olam is not like we're talking about Chas V'Shalom, a human king. Long live the king. Long live the king's honor and glory. Kings need honor and glory. We can't transpose that concept into God. Yehi Chavod Hashem L'olam. Let God's honor be forever, because God needs the honor. He doesn't need the honor. He willed a creation from which he can gain honor, but he can not will the creation and not get the honor. He doesn't need the honor. It comes from a ratzon. V'otavini, and this is true for everything. Ramchal just giving us an example of a pasuk. Yehi Chavod Hashem L'olam, Yismach Hashem Amasav. Let God rejoice. Does that mean that God rejoices and sometimes he's unhappy, sometimes he is happy? Chas v'sholom, God doesn't change his moods because then he's a human being. And that's what we're going to read Blineda tomorrow in the Rambam in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. God doesn't get angry, sad, upset, happy. These are all things for us to understand, as we'll see tomorrow in the Rambam. It helps us understand what's happening in Shemayim, as we have explained several times. V'otavini, you should also know, even though we now know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is happy with creation, meaning he's happy he created the world. We say he's happy. We're not talking about a human emotion. That's why it's difficult when we're talking about these concepts. Keep out the human emotion thing. V'heim l'kovet elav, and the Bria is honor for him. Ke'inyan shenema, as it says in Tehillim Kuf Daled, Yehi Chavod Hashem L'olam Yismach Hashem B'masav Lo Nachshov. We are not to think that Bnei said because of these kind of psukim shebezman shelo hoyin nimtzayim eile imkein hayisa chaser men yisvachsim v'kol chas v'sholom. So now one would say as follows: now that the world is created, Hashem is so happy and he's rejoicing with creation. And now that the world is created, God is honored. But before the world was created, God had no honor because there's nobody here to honor him. And God didn't rejoice because there was no creation. Chas v'sholom to talk that way. Because when you talk that way, you're saying that before creation, God was missing honor. And before God created the world, he was missing simcha. There was something missing. And he, therefore, because he was lacking, he created the world so that he can fulfill his existence with simcha. And then he can fulfill his existence with kavod. Chas v'sholom. We don't talk this way because it's nonsense. God was never lacking in anything. It's just that once God willed creation, the creation gives simcha. And once God willed creation, the creation gives kavod. But God can unwill it, and he doesn't need the kavod, he doesn't need the simcha. And before creation, again, not before in quote marks, because before creation is no time, but before creation, what does the word before creation mean? We have to add words now. Before God willed creation, that becomes the key word now. Before God willed creation, none of this was relevant. Before God willed creation, there's no such thing as God being happy, or God rejoicing, or God getting covered. Before he willed creation, none of this was even, it wasn't, I can't say in creation, none of this was relevant. It didn't exist. Once God willed creation, creation now is a source of simcha, whatever that means, and it's a source of kavod, whatever that will mean. But it's only post the will to create do these things become issues and relevant. Before the will to create, there was no kavod and there was no simcha, and God, quote unquote, didn't need it before creation because creation is will, and with the will came these things. Elikvar Maru, the Ramchal says, I've already told you. Ha'adin yisbach shumay b'metziosei ha'poshet ein mokem levroy imay klal einen shayachim binyana. God's simple existence, it's simple as we explained, there are no component parts. God's the simplest existence that you can imagine. There's nothing interacting there. The eyes and the ears and the nose and the heart and the liver and the kidneys and the spine all have to interact in this perfect way. It's a complex machine. God is simple. He's pashut. He sees how? He sees. He hears how? He hears. There's no part that hears. There's no part that sees. God is a pashut. It's simple. His truth is simple. His existence is simple. It's uncomplicated. It's unconflicted. It's simple. Therefore, in that simple existence, creation has no shaykhs to him at all. It has no analogy to him. It's not a mashal in any way to him. But once he willed a creation, after God willed creation, because of his will in the creation, there is something called the creation can bring about simcha, and the creation can bring about kavod. But pre-creation, none of this is even a discussion point. Before the will to create, there is no creation, there is no simcha, there is no kavod, because God doesn't need any of these things. He lacks nothing. Post-creation, God willed the creation, and in that will to create, he created in the will an ability for creation to bring about simcha and kavod l'shamayim. We'll take a look. Okay, we'll take a look tomorrow, Bli Neder, at the next lines in the Ramchal and footnote 19 from Rav Friedlander, a very important footnote about this whole concept of kavod to the Ribbono Shel Olam and simcha to the Ribbono Shel Olam, and that it's only a ratzon and not a need. People have a need to be happy. Nobody wants to be sad and disappointed. Nobody wants to be depressed. People want to be happy. They need to be happy. People have a genuine need for a certain amount of kavod. If it gets out of hand, the person has a problem. But people want to have a sense of self, and they want other people to understand that they have a chashivas. We're not talking about egomaniacs, we're talking about a sense of chashivas. And that's something that a human being needs. The Rosh Hashanah doesn't need these things. He doesn't need it because he doesn't need the world at all to exist. As the Rambam told us, if the world didn't exist, it wouldn't have an effect, absolute iota on God's existence. God created the world out of will, lehetiv, or gili hayichud, as we explained the two together. But other than that, God doesn't need the world, doesn't need anything. He's not a mukhrach. But once he willed the world, with that will, the world had the ability for simcha and kavod for the Ribbono Shel Olam.